Where we are standing here, give or take 5 or 6 feet, this is exactly where the body was. He was never caught, and he did indeed get away with all the horrible things that he did.
After all your years of research, you think you know who Jack the Ripper is?
I'm convinced it's him personally.
Can you tell me what he dressed like?
He's animal.
This is crazy.
Of all the serial killers, there's only a small percentage of these people are really as nasty and violent and graphic as Jack the Ripper was.
Speaking of paranormal, you did mention 3am.
Yeah.
And you know how 3am is like
Devil's Hour?
I did hear this superstition. See, it happened to us before as well.
What?
Like, remember when we received that random like ring at the door?
Oh, yeah.
We looked outside.
And no one was there?
Nobody, bro.
Oh, so that's a thing too?
Yeah, they say that if you ever hear a random ass ring at the door, to never open the door because you're inviting an evil spirit or a spirit inside your crib.
I'm just not opening that in general. Like, that, even if it's a spirit or if it's a regular person.
It's also kind of creepy, bro, because I do remember we opened the door and stuff.
Yeah, like dumbasses.
And just recently, we had ordered Uber Eats, right?
Yeah.
This is real shit. I'm not making this up. The Uber Eats guy literally looks at the house and it's like, you guys have ghosts here, right?
The f do you mean?
He's like, my mom died when I was younger here.
Why the f would you say that?
My brother was like, what the fuck? Why do you say that?
That probably explains all and weird stuff that you guys heard, so it kind of makes sense actually.
Now it's even creepier, bro. Everything that we talk about, everything is shit. Hopefully I get the kids sleep at night, bro.
Imagine stumbling upon the dark web and finding a list of random names that ends up being a hit list. Would you tell police, and what if they didn't take it seriously? Let's discuss this chilling story that began in 2020. Tech expert Carl Miller finds himself in a race against time. He has to try and save strangers' lives when he discovers a murder-for-hire website with a secret hit list that details the names of hundreds of innocent people. The crazy thing is, these people have no idea they're in danger. In the podcast Kill List, Carl Miller takes matters into his own hands. However, with these victims' names, addresses, and personal details in the hands of dangerous individuals paid to hunt them down, the clock is ticking quickly. This gripping weekly podcast will have you dying to know what happens next. I found this podcast through Wondery's Exhibit C library and binged all of the episodes. It literally has the most nail-biting true crime stories covering cults, scams, and cold case murders, so be sure to check it out for your true crime fix.
Imagine losing your limbs just because your dog licked you. Well, that's exactly what happened to Greg Manterfell. He was letting his dog lick him like we all do when suddenly days later he became very sick. When Greg first started noticing symptoms, he thought it was just the flu, fever chills, and some muscle aches. But within hours, things took a shocking turn. Dark bruises started appearing all over his body and he was rushed to the hospital. Greg's limbs began turning black as his body prioritized his vital organs, cutting off blood flow to his arms and legs to keep him alive. Doctors were stunned to see that his infection had spread so fast, causing severe tissue damage within hours. Doctors traced his condition to a rare bacterial infection called Cytocatophaga. This bacteria is actually common in dogs and cats' saliva, but it's super rare for it to affect humans like this. The bacteria entered his bloodstream and triggered sepsis, a life-threatening reaction where the body attacks itself. His blood pressure plummeted and circulation to his limbs cut off, and doctors had no choice but to amputate his legs and parts of his arms to save his life.
This little girl went missing in 2017, but she was just found alive after being recognized from a recent Unsolved Mysteries episode on Netflix. Kayla Unbehan was 9 years old when she was reportedly abducted by her mom in Wheaton, Illinois. She was last seen on the 4th of July on a camping trip while spending the holiday with her mom, who at the time only had certain visitation rights. Kayla's mom and dad separated just a few weeks after she was born, but what ensued was a lengthy and nasty custody battle. But when July 5th, 2017 came and Heather failed to return home with their daughter, Kayla was reported missing and a warrant was issued for Heather's arrest. But the two seemingly vanished into thin air. Over the years, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children kept releasing age-enhanced photos of Kayla in hopes of finding her. And just last year, her case was also featured on an episode of Unsolved Mysteries on Netflix about parents who've abducted their kids. But just last weekend, a store owner in Asheville, North Carolina recognized Kayla after having watched her episode on Netflix and called the police. And 6 years after her disappearance, Kayla has officially been located safe. Her mom, Heather, has been arrested and was charged with 1 count of child abduction. She's being held on a $250,000 bond while awaiting extradition to Illinois. On Kayla's 15th birthday earlier this year, her dad posted this tribute on the Facebook page dedicated to finding her, called Bring Kayla Home.
This is the case of Grace Mullane, a 21-year-old traveler. She wanted to travel to mad different places, and she would always keep her family posted and updated. And out of nowhere, on December 1st, she was meeting up with this guy. His name was Jesse Kempson. She had met this guy on Tinder. Basically, they met up in kind of like a mall type thing. It had bars, restaurants.
Somewhere to just hang out and
exactly.
vibe.
There's messages. At first, she's kind of a little skeptical about going to see him, but she ends up obviously going to see him. They eat at a restaurant there. She starts texting her friend like, oh, we click and they go to a second spot, which is like kind of like a bar, a little more secluded, not really that much people, like Sky City. After they go back to his hotel, December 2nd comes, which is the next day, and it's Grace's 22nd birthday. Her family spams her, oh, happy birthday, and they get no response. The family automatically gets suspicious about it. They report it to the cops. They message the hostel, so they look for the footage, and they see her leave December 1st, the guy she met on Tinder. They find more CCTV footage. They trace it back to his hotel now. They see that they walk in. She never comes back out of the room, but he does the next day. He goes to a store. He buys a suitcase.
Oh gosh, no.
He comes back to the room. Then later on in the day, he buys cleaning supplies, telling the hotel staff, I just spilled some wine in my room. I'm gonna just clean it up real fast. Nobody thought nothing of it, bro. They go back to the hotel. They ended up seeing infrared blood stains on the floor. As much as he was trying to clean it,
They could still see that shit.
they obviously bring him into interrogation. He first said that they separate ways, they parted ways, but now he's like, I remember going in the room, she was into that rough sex, she wanted me to choke her, she just ended up dying and I didn't know what to do.
Search for these 2 missing girls on Monday ended with finding 7 bodies on a remote Oklahoma property. This is what we know so far. These are the 7 people who were found shot to death on the Henrietta property. The property was rented by 39-year-old Jesse McFadden, who was a convicted sex offender. He lived there with his wife Holly and her 3 teenage kids, Riley, Michael, and Tiffany. Jesse reportedly hid his criminal history from his family and friends until recent months, and he was described as standoffish and extremely controlling, keeping his family under lock and key. He was on the Oklahoma State Sex Offender Registry after being convicted of first-degree rape back in 2003. He was released from prison in late 2020, which I honestly can't believe because while he was serving that sentence, he was using a contraband cell phone to send nude photos and videos of himself to a 16-year-old girl. But nonetheless, he was released anyway. Over the weekend, 2 of Tiffany's best friends, 14-year-old Ivy Webster and 16-year-old Brittany Brewer, were over at the family's home having a slumber party, which was pretty regular for them. An Amber Alert was issued when they didn't return home late Sunday evening. The following day, Jesse had a scheduled court hearing for charges of soliciting sexual conduct with a minor and for possession of CSAM, which he failed to show up to. Subsequently, a warrant was issued for his arrest, and when executing a search warrant, authorities found the bodies of all 7 people on the property, including Jesse himself. According to authorities, the bodies were not found in the residence, but in separate locations on the property. They were all shot between 1 and 3 times in the head and appeared to be running away from Jesse, who shot and killed all of them before turning the gun on himself. Not many details have been released, including what the motive may have been, but this was a completely shocking and senseless tragedy. It makes me wonder why Jesse was ever let out of prison in the first place. I've attached the GoFundMes for Ivy and Brittany's families in my bio if you'd like to help them during this difficult time.
This disturbing story that I'm about to explain might make you never use Tinder ever again. In November 2017, the woman you see right here, whose name is Cindy Loof, was swiping aimlessly on Tinder until she matched with a woman named Audrey. The two agreed to meet on their first date on the night of November 14th. Everything was perfect, and Sydney even took this picture before she went on the date, saying, "Ready for my date." On their date, they shared life stories and a bunch of laughs. But things took a turn for the worse at the second date when Audrey asked Sydney to go into her apartment. And as a result, Sydney never returned home. Sydney's family knew something was wrong when she didn't text them for 4 days and her pet cat wasn't fed. So as a result of all this happening, they immediately called the police. Unfortunately, a couple days later, Sydney Loof's body was found. Her body was brought to the morgue in 6 different garbage bags because she had been cut into 14 pieces while a part of her upper left arm was never found. After police investigation, the police found it very odd that 51-year-old Aubrey Trail and 25-year-old Bailey Boswell posted videos on Facebook claiming their innocence when the police were never even questioning them. It turns out that this couple is using the pseudonym Audrey on Tinder to lure Sydney into their apartment and recruit her into a cult. And the only reason Aubrey Trail dismembered Sydney's body and removed her organs was because he panicked after she accidentally passed out during a sexual fantasy. Aubrey Trail was convicted of first-degree murder, and Bailey Boswell was facing first-degree murder. And this picture right here is the last known image of Cindy Loof before she was brutally murdered by her Tinder date. Or in this case, she thought it was her Tinder date. All in all, this case is extremely disturbing, and rest in peace to Cindy Loof. It also goes to show that you have to be careful when you go on dates with strangers. You never truly know who somebody really is in this disturbing world.
What if I told you a Harry Potter star was brutally murdered? The Harry Potter books and films have captivated audiences across the globe for decades. But did you know a fatal stabbing cast a dark cloud over the films? Robert Knox was born in 1989 and loved acting from an early age. He went to Beth's Grammar School in Bexley and had been acting since age 11. He started to get kind of small roles in TV shows like The Bill, which you'll remember if you're my age. He went on to appear in the 2004 film King Arthur. Now in 2007 he auditioned for a role in the Harry Potter films. If he got this role, it would obviously be amazing for his career. And sure enough, he got the part of Marcus Belby in The Half-Blood Prince. He was thrilled to not only get the role in this film as well, but also be cast as the role of Marcus in the following film, The Deathly Hallows 2. However, no one had any idea that he would not survive to film the second film. On the 17th of May 2008, it's reported that 18-year-old Rob and his friends got into an altercation with a guy named Carl Bishop outside of a bar. A week later, on the 24th of May, Rob was out with his younger brother Jamie. This was just 4 days after the commencement of filming of the Harry Potter film, so he was obviously on a high. The boys and some other friends that they were with were outside a bar in Sidcup in London. Just after midnight, something horrific unfolded. Carl confronted the group with what is reportedly 2 kitchen knives. This turned into a vicious brawl. Rob was desperately trying to save his younger brother Jamie when he was stabbed. Tragically, the stabbing was fatal. Carl was arrested and charged with murder and reportedly showed absolutely no remorse for the attack. He was found guilty and was given life in prison with a minimum of 20 years. An annual film festival was created in Rob's honour, named the Rob Knox Film Festival.
These Wicked dolls are being recalled because the manufacturer put a link to a pornography website on the packaging. Now, we've seen this happen before, but let's talk about this. So these are some of the Wicked dolls that are coming out in anticipation of the Wicked film that's about to be released. And honestly, if parents hadn't looked into this, I don't know if this ever would have been discovered. You can get the Glinda doll or the Elphaba doll. But regardless of what doll you go to the store right now and purchase, on the back of the doll right above the barcode is a link to www.wicked.com. Now, I'm not going to encourage viewers to go look up what that is, but this links to a graphic website for adults only. Now, not only is it disturbing that none of the people in the entire process of bringing these dolls to life actually looked up the link that they were printing on millions of these dolls, but this isn't the first time that this has happened. There have been lots of dolls in the past that have accidentally had pedophile symbolism printed on them. If you want me to make another video about that stuff, let me know. But I mean, it's scary to think of how many children could have been exposed to something like this if they would have just typed this in. Obviously, these dolls are meant for young children. And yeah, it blows my mind how nobody seems to ever catch these things until it's absolutely too late. It's kind of like that Trolls doll, if you guys remember that, where you touch the troll doll's bottom and it makes noises. That was a really weird, disturbing thing too. But yeah, if you have children, make sure you watch out for this doll.
Oh, I wasn't sad. I just needed a...
Just a few days after that TikTok was posted, the TikToker in the video, Caleb Graves, would be dead. Caleb was a poetry writer, a marathon runner, a writer, director, screenwriter, producer, and like I said before, he loved to run in marathons. In September of this year, Caleb traveled to Anaheim, California to run in the Disneyland Halloween Half Marathon weekend. Basically, this is a marathon that takes people through the Disney parks. It's got a Halloween theme around it. But Caleb posted some eerie, almost prophetic TikToks before his untimely passing. In the TikToks in the days before his death, he talked about heat exhaustion and said that just walking his dog around with the heat that was hitting California at the time, he felt heat exhaustion like he could pass out. He also said in one of the videos, "I really hope I get through the race tomorrow morning. The fact that it's early will help me out because it's not cute to just lose control of your body, just fall asleep like that." Well, Caleb did end up running the Disney half marathon, but right as he crossed the finish line, workers noticed that Caleb was clutching his chest. So Caleb did end up finishing the race. He crossed the finishing line, and shortly afterwards, he collapsed after going into cardiac arrest. About an hour later, he was pronounced dead at the hospital. This is an extremely tragic story. Caleb was only 33 years old, and you can tell that nobody could have ever possibly expected a death like this. But at least the one silver lining that I believe I could find in a story like this is that at minimum, Caleb did finish his final race. He crossed the finishing line. But this is still just such a sad, tragic story.
His name was Jeffrey Spade. This happened in February 1st of 2021. The victims were James and Lisa Goy. It's like mixed confusion in the comments. People are saying, oh, they deserved it, but also nobody deserves to die. So basically what happened is that the victims, they were the neighbors and they were shoveling snow, but they were shoveling snow onto his
Property?
His backstory is that he's a veteran and he had served in the army. He's pretty up, and his wife had just died and shit too. So like he was, I guess, on edge constantly or whatever.
Yeah.
He was telling them, stop shoveling snow on my stuff, bro.
And what did they say?
That's when he goes inside, grabs his pistol, and then she goes ahead and says, shoots the wife and the husband and stuff, and then he literally comes out with a AR-15, bro, and obviously does what he did, bro. The cops end up coming. They end up hearing one more shot inside the guy's house. Yeah.
Well, you said there's people defending the guy, or
It's not defending him, but also like coming at the victims and saying like why the fuck they did that. Like, in my honest opinion, bro, they did the wrong thing for like fucking with him, but that doesn't mean kill them. You know what I mean, bro? Like, call the cops on them, like tell them to stop.
Friday, authorities in Griffin, Georgia found a 10-year-old child who weighed 36 pounds walking through a neighborhood looking for food. His parents, Tyler and Krista Shinley, were just arrested and have been accused of keeping him confined in his bedroom over the past 3 years and basically starving him to death. This is what we know so far. Neighbors spotted the boy walking down Westminster Circle without shoes, looking incredibly frail, so they took him in and called the police. When authorities arrived, the boy told him that he was hungry and walking to a nearby Kroger to buy food. He told them, quote, "Please don't make me go back home." End quote. The boy was described by police as thin, with discolored skin and visible injuries. He was then taken to a nearby hospital to be treated for severe malnutrition and a low heart rate. Again, he weighed only 36 pounds, which is equivalent to a 4-year-old. After the boy was found, his dad Tyler turned himself into authorities, and his mom Krista was arrested shortly after. During the investigation, it was revealed that they kept their son confined in his cell-like bedroom for extended periods of time and intentionally withheld food from him. Along with that, they also withheld other basic necessities from him, such as light, hot water, toilet paper, human interaction, and a view of the outside world. Court documents showed that the boy also suffered from dental injuries and disfiguration as a result from the abuse. 4 other kids were also found in the home, but according to authorities, there is no indication that they have been physically abused. But they did witness what their parents did to their brother. The Georgia Police Department has confirmed that all of the kids were being homeschooled. The Shinleys were described by neighbors as very private people, and on the outside and on social media, you would have never guessed what was going on behind closed doors. Tyler and Krista are being held in the Spalding County Jail and were just denied bond. They face charges such as false imprisonment, cruelty to children, and attempted murder, as well as many others. The child is reportedly now in stable condition, and the rest of his siblings have been placed in state custody.
This is the class photo, one of the most disturbing and shocking photos of all time explained. Okay, so at first glance, this photo looks like an ordinary American high school class photo, right? That is true until you realize that the 2 boys in the upper left-hand corner shooting imaginary guns at the camera is none other than Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold. A few weeks after this photo was taken at Columbine High School in 1999, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold put an evil plan that they'd been working on for more than a year into action. The 2 seniors placed 2 bombs in the cafeteria as well as in their cars, which were parked in the school's lot. These bombs failed to detonate, but the 2 boys proceeded to shoot and kill 12 students and 1 teacher. They shot and injured a further 21 people, while 3 others were injured trying to escape the massacre. Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold then committed suicide in the school library. It was revealed afterwards that the shooters hoped that their planned massacre would claim more lives than the Oklahoma City bombing, which took the lives of 168 people. This is one of the most famous and one of the worst school shootings of all time, and it's crazy that Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold foreshadowed what they were doing in this class photo. Now when I look at this photo again, all I see is a bunch of seniors in high school ready to graduate. But Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold are ready to take as many lives as humanly possible. waiting to follow through with a plan that they've been working on for over a year.
This horrific crime case was blocked online in some countries for being so disturbing. Please be warned before watching, I even had to take some breaks while researching this case. It was 2007 in the Czech Republic. Police raided a house to find a disturbing scene. A small 8-year-old boy named Ondřej Muerova was chained up like an animal in the cellar. The story that unfolded was something like that out of a horror film. Now, to understand this story and what happened, we need to talk about this boy's mum. She was 31-year-old Clara. She had 2 sons, Ondřej and Jacob. She was reportedly originally married to the son's father, but they split up due to her mental health problems. She ended up joining a cult called the Grail Movement with her sister, so the boy's auntie. The cult originated in the 40s in Germany and believes in using women as slaves and abusing your own children. Terrifyingly, this cult is still around today. Now, Clara and her sister Katerina interestingly met a 13-year-old girl who told them a sad story about her life. The young girl, pictured here, stated that she was an orphan and she was 13 years old and she was called Anika. The sisters actually took her in as their own. Bizarrely, she was actually a 33-year-old woman. She had a health condition which meant she looked extremely young for her age and was a lot smaller than she should have been. Her real name was Barbara Skolova. Evidence from this case suggests that Katerina did in fact eventually find out that this lady was lying to them. It's believed she chose not to tell her sister Clara. Now, Barbara actually ended up facilitating some really horrific abuse of the little boys. The women ended up stating that these boys were evil and possessed, and they needed to keep them in cages. They gagged and whipped these little boys and also burned them with cigarettes. They were also horrifically SA'd. They used a webcam to broadcast the abuse to other cult members who joined the live streams and seemingly gave instructions of what to do. As if this wasn't absolutely horrifically disgusting enough, this next part is absolutely abhorrent. The mother of Ondřej partially skinned him alive and then fed his flesh to the other women. Through some absolute miracle, it seems, the webcam ended up connecting to a neighbour's house and the neighbour saw what was going on. And thank God they did, and obviously immediately alerted authorities. Thankfully, police immediately arrested Clara and Katerina. However, Barbara managed to convince them that she was a child. She was let go and fled to Norway, where she took on another identity. She posed as a child named Adam, and she cut her hair and she wore baggy clothes to try and pose as the boy. She even managed to enroll in a school and trick all of the students and the teachers there. However, this was ultimately short-lived and she was eventually tracked down by authorities and was extradited. She was charged with child abuse and pleaded not guilty. She claimed that she had this disorder that meant she felt like she was different personalities. Thankfully, though, she was found guilty even though she was given just 5 years in prison. Clara, the mother, got just 9 years and Katerina got 10.
Hammer coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
A dismembered human body has washed up on a beach in New York. On Friday the 17th of November, the New York Police Department got a disturbing phone call just before 12:30. They arrived at Breezy Point Beach to discover a human torso with legs attached but no head or arms. The unidentified body has been sent to the medical examiner to try and determine the cause of death. However, obviously the fact that the body has been dismembered and also that the body was in water is going to make this incredibly hard. The identity of the person has not yet been released to the public, and it's not yet clear whether the police even know this information. The discovery comes weeks after Emmy Award-winning Ross MacDonald from Dublin vanished. He disappeared on the 4th of November after riding his bike in roughly the same area. His bike was found at Fort Tilden Beach near Roxbury, which is a popular swimming location. It's just 3 miles away from Breezy Point Beach.
I turned 29 little girls into life-size dolls. I am Anatoly Moskvin, a recognized Russian historian. I dedicated my life to studying history, but I had a dark and unhealthy obsession. I was fascinated by cemeteries, funeral rituals, and death. I began visiting cemeteries, exhuming the bodies of young girls, and bringing them back to my home. I spent entire days dressing them, applying makeup, and maintaining them. To me, they weren't dead. They were just asleep. My house became a macabre mausoleum filled with these life-size dolls. Every day I would talk to them, sing lullabies to them, and even organize birthday parties. It was my way of giving them a second life. But in 2011, the police uncovered my dark secret. 29 dolls, each formed from the remains of a young girl, were discovered in my residence. I was apprehended and convicted of desecration of graves. I am Anatoly Moskvin, the historian who turned the dead into dolls.
You may know the story of Lizzie Borden, who was arrested for the axe murder of her father and stepmother. But did you know there was another axe murder that happened around the time as the one that Lizzie was being tried for? And it completely changed the Lizzie Borden trial. On August 4th, 1892, Lizzie Borden's father and stepmother were found hacked to death with an axe inside of her home. Lizzie was home when this occurred, and at one point she went upstairs and walked past the guest bedroom, which held the mangled body of her stepmother, but she claimed that she saw nothing the entire day. It sounded really suspicious, and many people thought she committed the crime, but there was no physical evidence in the house that really tied her to it. What a lot of people don't know, though, is that that spring there was another axe murder in Lizzie's town. Bertha Manchester, a farmer's daughter, was found with 23 axe wounds to the head. The sketch artist did her so dirty. But this crime was committed by a man, a farmhand who had a wage dispute with her father. And to get revenge, he killed Bertha. This led a lot of people in the community to believe that only a rage-filled man could have committed a crime like this. And Lizzie was a very mild-mannered woman. Could this have contributed to why she was acquitted? So I had no idea how common it was to actually see supernatural beings during car wrecks, but so many of you guys had crazy stories. It reminds me of this story from 9/11 about the last guy that made it out of the South Tower who was led out by a person that wasn't there. But before we get into it, if you're interested in these kinds of stories, I just did a whole podcast episode about them. So Ron DeFrancesco was on the 84th floor of the South Tower, right in this area on 9/11. He survived the impact, but he runs to a stairwell because he knows he has to get out of the building. But when he opens up the stairwell, people are running up, not down. So he starts going up, but he gets a feeling that they're not going to make it out if they go up. So around floor 91, he turns around and he starts heading down. But in the stairwell, there's smoke and debris and fire everywhere. And also there's just people passed out all around him. So he thinks he's about to die when all of a sudden he hears this voice go, "Get up, keep going." He kind of thinks at first it's a fireman, but no rescue teams had made it up that high just yet. So he gets up and he starts going down, and this voice is pointing out where the debris and the fire is, making sure that he's safe the whole way. And then once he's in the clear, it just disappears. Ron was the last person to make it out of the tower, and he fully credits this supernatural being.
I killed 3 of my friends, whom I turned into biscuits and soap that I gave to those around me. I am Leonardo Cianciulli, born on November 14th, 1893, in Montella, Italy, and I am nicknamed the Soap Maker of Correggio. My eldest son, Giuseppe, was called for military service during World War II, and I was extremely afraid for his safety. In order to protect my son, I performed rituals and sacrifices, believing that it could safeguard him and prevent him from being killed. To attract my victims, I invited them for tea. That's how I killed my first victim, Faustina Setti. I poisoned a glass of wine that I gave her, then used a hatchet to cut her body into several pieces, which I used to make soap sold in my shop. For the other 2 victims, I brought them to my home, making them believe I was going to find them a husband, and then simply poisoned their tea. I then used the blood of my victims to make delicious biscuits that I gave to my neighbors and friends. The sister of my last victim began to worry about her disappearance, and the police then knocked on my door to question me. At that time, I was wearing the ring of the last victim, and that's how my sinister secret was discovered. I was then sentenced to 30 years in prison and 3 years in a psychiatric institution. I served only 24 years before succumbing to a stroke in 1970.
My father's hands, driven by primal rage, reached for Larry Nassar in that courtroom, the man who grievously violated me. I'm Emma Ann Miller, standing with a legion of survivors against the doctor who turned trust into terror. But more on that courtroom scene in a moment. Nassar's abuse was systematic, a calculated predation under the guise of medical treatment. He targeted young gymnasts, myself included, using his authority to perform invasive procedures that were entirely unnecessary and deeply traumatic. These acts were not just betrayals of trust, they were deliberate, repeated assaults on our bodies and minds. Now, back to that courtroom. My father's attempt to attack Nassar was not just an act of raw emotion. It was an eruption of the accumulated pain and betrayal felt by so many. Nassar's subsequent sentencing to up to 175 years marked a pivotal moment of justice. It was more than a legal verdict. It was a declaration that our voices mattered, that our pain was acknowledged, and that even those in positions of power are not above the law. Our story, marked by anguish and bravery, continues to echo as a fierce reminder of the resilience of survivors and the relentless pursuit of justice.
To grant me 5 minutes in a locked room with this demon.
These are videos humans were never meant to see. Okay, so the video you're about to see shows a skier going down a mountain when suddenly a bear starts chasing her. And I mean starts chasing her to kill her. And the entire time she doesn't see the bear or realize it's chasing her because she's listening to Work by Rihanna. She was seconds away from death. Here's the video. These are pictures with the most disturbing backstories, part 6. This picture is from a video on the dark web called Blank Man Soup, and this picture has an insanely disturbing backstory. This man is being held hostage by these two individuals in super weird Ray Ray costumes, and the man is eating soup also, but it's not soup at all. It is actually the human remains of his dead wife and children that he is being forced to eat. And what makes this even more sad is that the man is crying hysterically because he knows he's about to die. Now, I'm about to show you the video, but be warned, it's extremely disturbing.
When this girl and her stepdad vanished from their house, no one could have predicted what was about to happen next. Sydney Randall was 14 years old from Arkansas. On the evening of the 9th of March 2013, her mum Denise noticed that she was missing, along with her stepdad. Her stepdad was Denise's husband John, and they had both seemingly vanished. Now Denise was relieved when John returned home in the early hours of the morning, but worryingly he wasn't with Sydney. Denise told him about her concerns and the fact that her daughter was missing, and John left the house again saying he was going to file a missing persons report. However, time went on with no news and John didn't return, so Denise decided to ring police herself. A huge search began for the missing girl and her now missing stepdad. That was until days later when John's body was discovered. He was found deceased in a field on the side of the road from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. John was deemed likely to be involved in Sydney's disappearance at this point, and eventually Denise agreed. Search teams were out in force to find the missing girl, but no luck. Weeks and months passed until eventually in May 2013 a body was discovered. Sydney was tragically found deceased in the Black River near the Lawrence and Randolph County lines. A medical examiner concluded that she died from blunt force trauma. DNA was found under her fingernails and this was determined to be that of John's DNA. Denise was understandably devastated by this news. She had believed that Sydney and John had a normal relationship. She couldn't have been more wrong. Sydney's dad at this point came forward to say that he had suspected that John was SAing his daughter. Sydney's friends also confirmed that Sydney had told them she was afraid of her stepdad. It's believed that he killed Sydney so that she wouldn't come forward and expose him for the abuse.
This is the story of Lacey Peterson and her unborn son Connor. Lacey Denise Rosher was born on the 4th of May 1975 in California to parents Sharon and Dennis. She had an older brother called Brent who'd been born in 1971. Lacey was a fun-loving child who worked on the family's dairy farm from a very young age and loved gardening with her mother. When Lacey was very young, her parents divorced and her mother remarried a man named Ron Gransky, who helped raise Lacey and Brent from the time Lacey was 2 years old. Lacey graduated from Thomas Downey High School and then attended university where she majored in ornamental horticulture. In 1994, Lacey was visiting a friend who worked at a cafe in Morro Bay. This is where she met Scott Peterson. They very quickly started a relationship and Lacey told her mother that she'd met the man she was going to marry. The couple dated for 2 years before moving in together. While Scott finished his senior year, Lacey took up a job alongside her studies. Lacey married Scott on August 9, 1997, and they soon moved back to Lacey's hometown to start a family. They bought a house together and in 2002, Lacey fell pregnant. Her due date was February 10, 2003, and they planned to name their son Connor. On Christmas Eve 2002, Scott left to go on a fishing trip at Barkley Marina. He said he'd last seen Lacey cooking and cleaning and that she was planning to walk the family dog, Mackenzie. Later that day, Mackenzie was found alone wandering the streets by a neighbour. She placed him in the Petersons' backyard. Scott returned home to find Mackenzie in the backyard, but the house empty. He washed his clothes and showered, stating that he got wet during his fishing trip. That evening, Lacey's mother received a phone call from Scott, asking if she'd seen Lacey. This was the first time that she learned that Lacey was missing. It was completely out of character. So Lacey's stepdad Ron called the police and reported her missing. When police arrived at Lacey and Scott's home, they searched her belongings and found that her keys, wallet and sunglasses were in her purse and placed inside a closet. Scott was questioned that evening, and he came across to officers as very calm and cool, even a little arrogant. He definitely didn't seem like someone who was crushed or even greatly disturbed by his wife's disappearance and possible death.
This Netflix star is a hardcore convicted pedophile, and this story is truly disturbing. So meet Jerry Harris. He was a star on the Netflix show Cheer. He's a famous cheerleader. And back when this show came out in 2020, he was all over. He was on the Ellen DeGeneres show. He was on various cheerleading programs. And yeah, he was one of the stars of the show Cheer. So the show Cheer actually followed a cheerleading team from Texas. And the show focused on the behind the scenes of cheerleading competitions, you know, what goes into it, all of the interactions between cheerleaders and the coaches. So when everybody first saw Jerry Harris on the show Cheer, they loved him. He was super over the top. He was always making people laugh. And Ellen DeGeneres even named him as her future Oscars correspondent. But then came the allegations in 2020. So a few months after the show debuted on Netflix, the FBI announced that they had a warrant for Jerry Harris's arrest. He had allegedly been seeking out relationships with minors, if you know what I'm talking about. Apparently, this entire thing was started by two twin brothers who were 13 years old when Jerry Harris was 19. And Jerry had been using Snapchat to try contact these young 13-year-old twin brothers and was asking for photos, videos, and to meet up. And once the FBI made this announcement, all sorts of messages started popping up that Jerry had sent minors on the internet, and they were really, really disturbing. And apparently Jerry's behavior wasn't only exclusive to the internet. He had actually met with minors in person and had contact with them, multiple minors. And I mean, you could actually look up these screenshots on the internet, and they are really disturbing what he was saying to literal children. So in September of 2020, Jerry Harris was arrested in Chicago and charged with the production of CP, and eventually he would face an additional 7 other charges. Now, he apparently had the 2 male victims that he targeted at the beginning, and then 4 other victims came forward. And they claimed that, yeah, he had done stuff in person with them, he had solicited things online. This Jerry guy was a true creep. And just last year, in 2022, Jerry Harris finally pled guilty to these charges, admitting that he had done this, and he was sentenced to 12 years in prison. And hopefully, because that sentence is not too long, he will learn something while he's in there. Otherwise, in about a decade, he'll be out on the streets again.
What? Look in there, mate. Look in there. What? Look in there.
These are videos humans were never meant to see. Okay, so we all know how terrifying and disturbing the Paris catacombs are. But if you don't know what the Paris catacombs are, I'll explain it to you real quick. In the late 18th century, major public health problems were tied to the city's cemeteries, so they started moving all the bodies underground. And it's the final resting place for about 6 million people. But the video I'm about to show you shows a guy that went very deep into the catacombs and got lost. And he just didn't get lost, he is still missing today. This video feels like its own horror movie, so here it is.
It's a point of view shot. The point of view shot is somebody just walking forwards with the camera. So basically he's filming what he's seeing very deep inside the catacombs. Other than the point of view shots are pictures of bones. Human bones. Occasionally he stops and he photographs bones, often in the shape of an arrow. These arrows point in a direction. Occasionally also he stops to photograph roomfuls of bones, which means that he's very, very deep inside the catacombs. What happened to him? Nobody knows. There are ways to match things up, to try to identify where this person was in the catacombs. At times you'll see there's signs, painted signs on the wall, which is not uncommon. People have been painting in the catacombs for centuries. So it is possible with these paintings that we may be able to retrace an itinerary to some extent. After about 40 minutes of these point of view shots and these pictures of bones, the person begins to walk faster and faster. Then he begins to run. We hear his breathing get louder and louder, as though something was scaring him. He's frightened. Occasionally he stops, perhaps to try to decide which way to run among all the many different corridors. He's running faster and faster and faster, deeper and deeper into the catacombs. And all of a sudden, he drops the camera. The camera just drops on the ground and keeps rolling. And you see his feet just run away. And it keeps rolling until it runs out of tape.
This is the story of Elizabeth Fritzl and her 24-year imprisonment at the hands of her own father. Elizabeth was born on April 16, 1966, to parents Joseph and Rosemary. The couple had 6 other children, but for some reason Joseph decided to target Elizabeth and began abusing her at just 11 years old. At 15 years old, Elizabeth managed to run away from home and took refuge with a friend in Vienna. Unfortunately, the police found her, and just 3 weeks later, she was returned home to her parents. Over the next few years, Joseph hatched a plan to make sure Elizabeth never escaped him again. On August 28, 1984, 18-year-old Elizabeth was lured into the basement by her father, saying that he needed help to fit a door. In reality, he'd been converting the family basement into a makeshift prison chamber, and the door was the last thing he needed to seal it. Elizabeth was unknowingly helping her father to seal the chamber in which she would spend the next 24 years of her life. When Elizabeth's mother, Rosemary, realised she hadn't come home, she reported her missing to the police. A month later, Joseph walked into the police station and handed them a letter. It stated that Elizabeth was absolutely fine and said she was living with a friend. In actual reality, she'd been forced to write the letter, which is one of many that she would be forced to write over the years. Joseph told police that she'd most likely run away and joined a cult.
Unfortunately, they bought his story and stopped looking. Joseph visited Elizabeth in the basement almost every day, and over the years she became pregnant a total of 6 times at the hands of her father and abuser. She gave birth in the basement a total of 6 times. One of those pregnancies was a twin pregnancy, and unfortunately one of the twins passed away at birth and was cremated by Joseph himself. One daughter and 2 sons, Kirsten, Stefan and Felix, stayed in the basement with Elizabeth, while the other 3 children, Lisa, Monica and Alexander, were taken upstairs to live in the house with Joseph and Rosemarie. Joseph and Rosemarie had regular visits from social workers. They told them that their 3 grandchildren had been left on the doorstep, and the couple were deemed suitable foster parents. Joseph decided, now that there were 4 people living in the basement, that it should be extended, and he put Elizabeth and her children to work straight away. They were digging soil out of the ground with their bare hands for hours on end every single day. They were given a fridge to store the food that Joseph gave them, and a hot plate to cook it on, and they were threatened with being gassed or electrocuted if they dared to try and escape. On April 19, 2008, Elizabeth's daughter Kirsten, now aged 19, fell seriously ill with kidney failure. Joseph agreed to seek medical attention and had her taken to hospital. Doctors soon realised that Kirsten had kidney failure due to lack of vitamin D. Little did they know that the first time Kirsten had seen daylight was when she was put into the ambulance. Please follow and I'll be back for part 2.
They found the skeletons of giant red-haired cannibals in this cave in Nevada. This story is stranger than fiction, so buckle up, I'm about to blow your mind. So this is the Lovelock Cave just outside of Lovelock, Nevada. And according to the oral history from the Paiute tribe that inhabited the lands, this cave was the home of the Sitaka, or cannibalistic red-haired giants. So according to the history from local indigenous tribes, these cannibalistic red-haired giants would come out from this cave, eat each other, eat local indigenous tribal members, and the local tribal members became sick of these giants, so they started a war with them, and eventually they burned them out of the cave by setting fires inside of the cave and killing the giants. That is why, according to them, you can see burn marks on the top of the cave. So this might seem like a sort of far-fetched tale, but it's rooted in historical fact and even archaeological findings. So 1911, a group of guano or bat poop miners is there in the cave excavating through the guano, and they discover something strange. Right there in the cave, they begin to unearth human remains, hundreds and hundreds of bones, lots of pottery, arrowheads, all sorts of artifacts, and according to them, they even find the skeletons of these giants. According to these miners, the giant skeletons that they found were over 6 foot 6 inches tall. There were loads of them, they were full skeletons, and they excavated them and brought them down to the locals. Some people who had seen the skeletons even claimed that they were over 8 feet tall. But since they are no longer visible to the public, we'll never know the truth behind the giants. But what happened to these skeletons? Well, they were apparently on display for a number of years. Lots of people came and saw them. They were written about in newspapers. And there's even still a giant handprint inside of the cave that to this day people attribute to being left by the giants. Locals, though, don't know exactly what happened to the skeletons of these so-called giants. According to some articles that I read, the Smithsonian Institution came and took them and put them somewhere. But I still can't find any information as to what exactly happened. It is documented, though, that people did discover these giant skeletons. So the Lovelock Cave is shrouded in mystery. I had even talked to somebody who lived near the cave that claimed to have seen a skinwalker-type creature near the entrance of the cave. And yeah, remember, like I said, there was allegedly a massacre of cannibalistic giants in there. There were hundreds of bones and human remains that were discovered inside of the cave. So needless to say, this place is extremely haunted. I actually visited the cave late at night and filmed an entire paranormal investigation inside of there, and it was one of the craziest nights of filming and investigating that I personally have ever experienced. If you want to watch the full video, it's on my YouTube channel now. The link is in my bio. But yeah, if you want your mind blown, we dived really deep into the history of skinwalkers, of these red-haired cannibalistic giants. I tried to figure out exactly what happened to the skeletons that were found in Lovelock Cave, and wow, it is one hell of a documentary. Like I said, if you want to watch it, the link is in my TikTok bio.
Killer accidentally admitted to his crimes by accident when he forgot he was wearing a microphone while taking part in a documentary. This is how a true crime documentary exposed a killer. In 1971, Robert Durst met Kathleen McCormack and they got married. At the time of her disappearance in 1982, Kathleen had nearly graduated college. She was last seen by a witness at a dinner party where she appeared to be upset. She got a call from Robert and left. Robert admitted to having argued with Kathleen that night, but he said he put her on a train to New York and then never saw her again. Her friend called police to report her missing. Interestingly, Kathleen had been treated at a medical centre for facial bruises weeks prior to this and told the friend that Robert had done it. Robert had actually been dating someone else for some time prior to this and had been living separately to Kathleen. When her family broke into her cottage to try and find out where she was, they found the place had been trashed and her possessions put in the bin. Kathleen's family always believed that Robert was involved in her disappearance. In 2000, Susan Berman, a friend of Robert's, was found murdered. Now, she'd actually provided Robert with an alibi for Kathleen's disappearance. Now, pay really close attention to this next bit. Days after she was killed, a letter addressed to the Beverly Hills Police Department contained Susan's address and the word cadaver on it. On the envelope, Beverly was misspelled. Robert admitted in 2005 that Susan had called him shortly before her death to say that the police wanted to question her about Kathleen going missing. It's believed that Robert killed Susan to keep her quiet. In 2001, Robert's neighbour's body parts were found floating in Galveston Bay. Robert's elderly neighbour, Morris Black, had been killed and Robert was arrested. He was actually released on bail and fled and was found about a month later in Pennsylvania. He was found with $37,000 cash, 2 weapons, and interestingly, Morris Black's driving licence. In court, Robert claimed he was acting in self-defence. He said he'd accidentally shot Morris and dismembered his body. Due to lack of forensics, he only got 5 years in jail. This is where things get really crazy. HBO was filming a documentary called The Jinx. During production, Susan's stepson found a letter written by Robert. This contained the same spelling error in the word Beverly as the anonymous letter to police. This implicated Robert in the murder. Now, while filming the documentary, Robert needed the toilet. He forgot that he had a microphone still attached to him. He was recorded talking to himself. He said, "There it is, you're caught. You're right, of course, but you can't imagine. Arrest him." And then he said, "What a disaster. He was right. I was wrong." And finally he said, "I'm having difficulty with the question. What the hell did I do? Killed them all, of course." There has been an absolutely horrific murder this week that was live streamed on Instagram. This case is extremely disturbing, so please be warned before watching. On Friday, 12,000 people watched a Bosnian bodybuilder kill his wife on Instagram Live. 35-year-old Nermin had been abusing his wife during their marriage and the pair had a young child. On Friday morning, he took to Instagram Live to tell his followers that they could witness a live killing. Absolutely horrifically, he turns the camera to his ex, whose face is completely covered in blood and disfigured. He calls her a derogatory name and blames her for her own death because she reported him to police. Disturbingly, you can hear the child crying in the background. He then tells his followers that he's the child's father and his ex had hidden the toddler from him for over a week and reported him to police for DV. So, in my opinion, yes, she's taking steps to keep her and her child safe from you. After shooting his wife in the head on Instagram, he then goads his followers saying, "Someone come and save the child." A police chase then began and he went on a shooting rampage. He continued to film and tells his viewers that he's killed 2 other people who actually turned out to be an innocent man and his young son. He also wounded a police officer, another man and a woman while on the run. He ended up unaliving himself on the same day.